Welcome back to the E-Commerce Flight, your go-to podcast celebrating small businesses and their impact on our world. Proudly presented in collaboration with Amazon. My name is Supriya. With the festive season around the corner, we all want to make sure we put our best juttis forward and keep an eye out for what's trending in fashion. But fashion has entered premium cultural institutions. Supporting a community of karigars is one such brand called Thivasa. Now, Thivasa is a modern, digital-first contemporary fashion brand with a keen focus on blending Indian art forms and functionality. It is also a testament to creativity in the business world. Now, the helm of this brand is this really dynamic entrepreneur, Himanshu Vardhan, with us, who's the founder of Thivasa, joining us in this episode. Welcome, Himanshu. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thanks for having me here today.
It's such a pleasure having you and finally getting to know more about Thivasa through you. So, Himanshu, what's interesting is that you began as a financial analyst and then you went on to do your MBA in US. How did Thivasa come into the picture eventually? We're very curious to know.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Now,
to start with, this podcast starts with a bomb of a question.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a bit of reflection as well.
Yeah.
It's because I've had 20 years of professional career, and when I would have started my professional career with the CFA, MBA, consulting firm and all of that, I would never have thought that I would be running a fashion brand. I think the journey has been interesting and it has primarily been inspired. So since I moved back to India for the last 8 or 9 years, I've had this opportunity to meet and interact with artisans, karigars from across India, whether it is the chicken curry artist from Lucknow, and you're wearing one of them,
yes.
Which is beautiful, or from Jaipur, women doing block printing, or beautiful work that is coming out of Muradabad, weaves that are coming from Varanasi. Over the last few years, as I had the opportunity to travel and meet a lot of these artisans, I was really inspired by their work. When they were practicing these art forms, when I used to talk to them, they didn't even think that they were working. This was their life. This was the heritage that they were preserving. Mm-hmm. And I felt that they had a meaningful life which was much more than I had. Mm-hmm. I was just a corporate animal or a corporate person working for my paycheck month to month. But these guys were doing something that made their lives very fulfilling. And that inspired me to think more from a creative aspect of my life. And I realized that I'm so passionate about the creative aspect, especially the Indian arts and crafts. And that motivated me to completely kind of take a different turn of my career from the world of Excel sheets to the world of karigari of Indian art forms.
Oh, that's wonderful. Eventually, I'm going to come to this whole transition that you had from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur. But before that, if I'm not mistaken, the word Thivasa is actually derived from the word Vas, which means belonging or to reside in, just like Vasudev Kutumbakam. So, what's the genesis story of the company and how do you exactly pronounce the name?
Yes, the name is pronounced as Thivasa.
Thivasa.
A lot of people also call it the Vasa.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually the genesis of it. The way we kind of came up with this word Thivasa is by combining the and Vasa, but we pronounce it as Thivasa because it sounds more sort of poetic, for lack of a better word, and we're a little bit lyrical as well. So that was the genesis. But we actually went through and researched more than 500 different names that we could actually come up with. Mm-hmm. It was a 3 to 4 month process. We had actually started to create the products, but it took us 3 to 4 months to actually finalize on a particular name. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Was because I am also a student, or I have a keen interest in Indian history, going back to hundreds and thousands of years. So I was very fascinated by how Sanskrit as a language had a role to play in Indian history and also in the language history of other languages across the world.
True.
So I wanted, whatever I did, I wanted it to have some connection to the Indian cultural or language, which is Sanskrit. So Vasa was the one that Vasa was that one sort of word that really stuck with me. I got fascinated by that, and then we had to take care of certain practical aspects as well, whether the trademark of a particular brand was available. I wanted it to be a small brand so that people could remember. Could it be a global brand name where people would remember and are able to sort of pronounce it easily?
Right.
So we went through this 3-4 months of research and trying to kind of figure out the right one before we kind of finalized on Thivasa.
I'm very curious to ask you, how were the reactions once the name was in place? Because 3-4 months long journey of figuring out a name, which I feel is really beautiful, by the way, for your brand.
Thank you.
How are the reactions, the initial reactions for it?
Look, I think initially when we started out, we were very, very small. Like we started out just with like from our apartments, just kind of making some products.
Yeah.
So obviously only few family and friends were aware of this, and maybe few customers who would come across it. So you would everybody would say, yeah, it's good. But now there are, thousands of brands who would pop up here and there. So they would all like good. But, it's really interesting because about an year and a half back, I was talking to some very senior executive. And when I was talking about Thivasa, he said the name itself sounds like this is going to be a very sort of big thing in India and maybe across the world. And it is so soothing and calming, and it kind of is very rooted in the Indian heritage, but it's also global. So as we have kind of become more accessible, more customers, more people have had awareness of the brand.
Yeah.
A lot of people have now been kind of talking about how it just like is just like a very natural name for a brand like us.
It's like you say Thivasa, and I think, you don't know Thivasa? You just know it's out there and it's amazing and it's something you should know. So great decision on the name for sure. But I also want to ask you this, that, you started your career with one of the big three, which probably means that, you got used to a very comfortable life with the big three. And obviously, as we were discussing before the cameras went on, that life is very different when you are employed with a company versus when you're an entrepreneur running a company, right? That has been a great shift for you. How did you end up managing that, and where do you feel you are today, and how are you handling it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's something that I sort of ponder on and think about all the time. And it is definitely nothing. I've had almost 20 years of professional career now that I've been worked across geographies in US and India. And but entrepreneurship is something that you could be prepared for certain skills, but you can't just be prepared for that experience.
Right.
So after having worked with whatever bigger companies, I kind of also realized that I wanted more challenge. I wanted to create an institution that enables smaller artisans and karigars across India, because I saw a lot of potential. So, as one of my professors who talks about stakeholder theory at Freeman, he's the father of stakeholder theory, talks about the purpose of a business is, it's like profits are like red blood cells in the body. That's not the purpose. The purpose, like your body's purpose is not to make red blood cells. They are there to kind of keep you alive. So for business also, profits are there to keep you alive, but the business needs a purpose. And for me, that purpose was very clear, to get the Indian artisans and karigars, not awareness and accessibility and market access, not just in India, but across the world. I think that's where Amazon is doing really great work, especially with the Karigar program, where it is helping smaller new age brands like us and access a channel to reach out to audiences not just in India but across the world with different platforms of it. And there are a lot of enablements that are built with it, and we've had really great experience with Amazon sort of working with them to get started and then scale over a period of time as well.
That's wonderful. But I'd also like to plug in a question here. Any advice for somebody who's an employee going on to become an entrepreneur?
So, yes, definitely. I mean, think really hard. Think really, really hard. Think like a lot of times before you think about making that switch from being an employee to entrepreneur. Because you're not going to have a salary predictability first of every month. If you are just doing it for money, don't do it. Build a professional career, because entrepreneurship, you go through a lots of ups and downs, and you can only go through them if you are really passionate about the field. So unless you are passionate about the product or the industry that you are starting up with, just don't do it. I think that'll be the second thing. The third thing is, it really builds you as a person. So it's a life experience. So I would also maybe contradict myself from initial this thing that everybody should try to experience it, because it is an experience that you would just not get in any other form in a job, where you are kind of trying to build an institution, a brand that has a certain purpose which is bigger than just your normal job, day-to-day job.
But that's great advice, actually. But tell me something. We spoke about the Karigar program, of course, by Amazon, which has been such a success. Now, when it comes to sales like the Great Indian Festival, obviously, that drive a lot of orders. Now, how do you handle that with such a small team?
I think that's where the role of Amazon becomes very important, because there are a lot of, it's not just a platform to get you access to the customers for us, but it's more than that. Like the way they handle logistics, even if we are doing 100 orders a day or 500 orders a day, it's Amazon's logistics is actually very nice and scaled up to deal with different set of volumes. So I think that has been very, very kind of supportive. So I think the enablements that are built with Amazon, whether it is around the logistics part of it, which is the shipping part of it, or the courier part of it, or preparing collateral or marketing material, using tools built within the Amazon seller platform, using AI and other things to kind of create very good creatives, is something that is very helpful to a small setup or a small business like us, and almost behave like a bigger business in terms of the collaterals that we can create or the scale that we can achieve by sort of shipping the orders. So in this new world of technology and technological platforms, these enablements are super important for a small business like us that helps us to scale up.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, in one of your interviews, you actually mentioned that one of your biggest weaknesses is that you are impatient. So I want to know, what's your vision for Thevasa? And also, I want you to add your intended path to make this vision with Thevasa a reality.
So definitely what drives me and what keeps me up at night and gets me up in the morning with whatever sleep that I can get is the vision to make Thevasa the first breakthrough Indian brand for the world. So when you really think about it, there are a lot of brands. Every developed country has a big brand that is global in nature. When you really think about from India, there isn't really one consumer fashion lifestyle brand that is for the world. So my vision is that Thevasa will be the first breakthrough brand in the next decade from India for the world. I think that's where Amazon's value proposition for a small business like us today is super important, because we can start the journey today in India with Amazon, but Amazon's reach with the obviously US being the biggest and the home market and other countries as well, it'll be very easy for us to first scale in India and then get that access to multiple other countries based on the the products that we have built, and reach out to a much more global sort of audience over a period of time. So that's my big vision. That's what keeps me impatient. I think it's probably not you require it also, but then it makes your life miserable because you're constantly in hunger for growth. So I think it's entrepreneurship is also maybe about those contradictions, that you have to have patience, but you also have to have impatience for growth.
For sure.
So it's kind of interesting of how you manage, how I manage that on a daily basis.
It's interesting to know at our end as well, for sure. But I really hope your dream comes true, Himanshu, with Thevasa.
Thank you.
But at the same time, I want to end this interview by getting your vantage point on e-commerce. Like, say, the Great Indian Festival. Let's assume you get 100 times more orders than what you do right now, right? What's next? I mean, we know more sales is good, sure, but I'm just trying to understand how a small business sort of plans based on such unprecedented numbers when you have that many orders. How do you plan it?
I mean, first of all, the Great Indian a campaign or a platform like Great Indian Festival is just an incredible campaign for especially brands in our space, which is fashion, lifestyle, or Indian handicrafts and Indian crafts. It's absolutely a great platform. I think the beautiful thing about this is that even though this particular campaign or an event would run for the next few days, the team and Amazon has been helping us to kind of prepare for it for last few days. So there's a lot of back-end work that they have done for helping and enabling smaller sellers like us to kind of anticipate the volume and provided, whether it is providing analytics through their dashboards or other insights through their teams, which helps us to be a lot better prepared to kind of make best use of these kind of events and reach out to the maximum audience across the world. And we won't complain if we have to have sleepless nights to send our orders and serve thousands of customers across India.
That's wonderful, Himanshu. A message for everybody out there, especially, aspiring entrepreneurs or small businesses that actually look at growing the way you're growing Tabasa today.
Start small, but think big. I know it might sound like a cliched. It might really sound like a cliched, but if you don't want to make something big, don't. If you're well educated, just keep in your job only, because what we need, you have to think about the stage at which we as a country are in today. We are at this cusp of next couple of decades of huge growth of the country and the people and all of those things. So think about what in your own small way, the venture that you create or anything that you create is going to contribute towards India in a kind of significant way. So start small, because you have to start small to get started. You can't start big.
True.
So start small, but keep your eye and sort of goal always towards that larger vision of making bigger impact. I think that is very, very important. And the good part now is that there are platforms like Amazon, especially Amazon is at the forefront of it, providing you opportunity to get started with just an internet connection, making some products sitting at home. Especially programs like the Karigar program have been created for people who want to just get started and are practicing these arts and crafts of India.
Absolutely. Well, you're truly leading with example out there, and I'm sure this is going to be very inspiring for people watching, listening right now. Thank you so much, Himanshu, for joining us on the e-commerce flight. I hope you're keeping inspiring, and I hope we keep meeting for these conversations.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. It seems like we're slowly building a roadmap on how you can start your own business if ever that entrepreneurial kida ever bites. That's it for today's episode. Keep tuning in for more such interesting stories. Today, this is me, Supriya, signing off from the e-commerce flight.